Amelia Carter had always believed that the smallest acts of kindness could change a person's entire day. It was something her mum used to say when she was growing up in a modest little weatherboard house on the outskirts of Melbourne: kindness doesn't cost a cent, love. But it can pay for miracles. Those words stuck with her long after she left home, moved closer to the city, and began juggling her hectic life as a uni student and part-time cafe worker along Brunswick Street. Her days were busy, often chaotic, and never quite predictable, typical Melbourne living. One moment the sun would be blazing down, and the next, the sky would unleash a cold, sideways rain. Still, Amelia found comfort in her routines, brewing coffee at dawn, handing over fresh muffins to regular customers, laughing with her co-workers, then heading home along Swanston Street with leftover sandwiches wrapped neatly in her backpack. She didn't take them for herself. She carried them because she knew she'd likely come across someone who needed them more. And on one particularly cold late autumn evening, she did. The city had just endured one of those sudden rain spells that drenched everyone unprepared. The footpaths glistened with puddles, tram bells chimed in the distance, and streams of people hurried past with umbrellas flipping inside out. Amelia, shivering slightly inside her thin jacket, was walking towards her tram stop when she noticed him. A man sat hunched near the edge of the shelter, completely soaked, knees drawn to his chest, his head bowed low as water dripped off his hair and onto the concrete. Most people walked past without giving him a second glance. But something about him made Amelia pause. Maybe it was the way he sat so still, as if trying to disappear. Maybe it was the quiet desperation in the way he clutched his arms. Or maybe it was simply because she had always felt an ache when she saw someone alone in the cold. She approached him slowly, not wanting to startle him. "Hey, are you all right?" she asked softly. The man lifted his head. His eyes were tired in the way that suggested more than just a bad night. His face was unshaven, his hair a mess, his clothes worn thin. But his eyes, there was something sharp behind them, something observant, almost calculating, covered by layers of exhaustion. "I'm fine," he muttered, though it was clear he wasn't. "Don't worry about me." Amelia didn't listen. She slipped her backpack off her shoulder and unwrapped a warm sandwich. "Here," she said gently. "You should eat something." He stared at the sandwich, then up at her, as if trying to understand why she would bother. "I don't have anything to give you in return," he said quietly. "You don't need to," she replied. "Just, let me help, yeah." The man hesitated, then took the sandwich with trembling hands. "Thank you," he murmured, voice barely audible. After a moment, he added, "My name's Tom." "Nice to meet you, Tom," Amelia said, offering a small smile. "I'm Amelia." Tom nodded politely, but she could see embarrassment flickering in his expression. Still, as he ate, she noticed something unusual. His mannerisms weren't like most people she had met living rough on the streets. He spoke clearly, his accent was neutral and educated, and he seemed more aware of his surroundings than someone who'd been struggling for months. "How long have you been out here?" she asked gently. Tom looked away. "A while," he said simply, ending the conversation, but Amelia didn't push. She sat with him a few minutes longer despite the cold seeping through her jacket. People stared as they walked past. A young woman sharing a bench with a homeless man wasn't something everyone expected to see. But she ignored the looks. After that evening, she saw Tom again. And again. He seemed to hover around the same tram stop, usually keeping to himself, always quiet, always watchful. Each day, Amelia brought him something warm to eat, and their conversations, though brief, grew a little longer. She learned that Tom rarely slept properly, often waking up and moving locations to stay safe. She learned that he preferred tea over coffee. And she learned that he was incredibly thoughtful. He spoke about books, about world issues, about things she didn't expect a man in his situation to know so well. But she also learned he avoided personal questions like a shadow dodging the light. One night, the temperature dropped sharply. Amelia stepped off her tram and spotted Tom struggling to stay upright on the bench, coughing harshly, his face pale and exhausted. A cold snap like this could be dangerous, even deadly, for someone sleeping outside. Without thinking twice, she rushed to him. "Tom, you're freezing," she said, panic rising. "You can't stay out here tonight." "I'll be fine," he insisted weakly. "No, you won't," she shot back. "Please. Come with me. I live close. You can warm up, get dry, sleep properly. Just for one night." Tom hesitated, conflict flickering in his eyes. But his body shook violently, betraying how unwell he really was. Finally, he nodded. Amelia helped him stand and wrapped her spare scarf around him before leading him towards her small terrace apartment. Inside, Tom looked overwhelmed by the simple comfort of warmth. She gave him dry clothes, made him tea, and insisted he take her bed while she slept on the couch. He tried to protest, but she wouldn't hear it. As he showered, Amelia noticed something she hadn't expected. A glimpse of a tattoo near his shoulder, something official looking, like an emblem or insignia. And when he stepped out, she caught him quickly hiding a small metal object in his bag, something he clearly didn't want her to see. She didn't ask. But she wondered. Later that night, when the apartment was quiet, Amelia heard Tom speaking softly on the phone. His voice was different, firmer, more controlled. She caught only fragments. "Not yet. I'm close. She doesn't know." Amelia lay awake, confusion tightening her chest. She had no idea Tom's arrival in her life was no accident, and that everything was about to change. The morning after the fight with Luke, Sophie woke to a pale, grey light filtering through her curtains. The apartment felt emptier than usual, the silence echoing in corners that had once held laughter and late-night chatter. She sat on the edge of her bed, tea cooling in her hands, and felt a familiar ache settle in her chest. Yet, amidst the heartbreak, a flicker of determination sparked. Sophie knew she couldn't stay tangled in what ifs and regrets forever. Work at the cafe was a welcome distraction. The hiss of the espresso machine, the smell of roasted beans, and the chatter of regulars pulled her out of her head for a little while. Her boss, Mrs. Hargreaves, a no-nonsense woman in her 50s with a fondness for sarcastic quips, noticed the slump in Sophie's shoulders. "You all right, love?" she asked, wiping down the counter. Sophie forced a smile. "Yeah, just tired, I guess." Mrs. Hargreaves gave her a knowing look, as though she'd seen this kind of heartbreak before. "Tired or heartbroken? 'Cause I can make you a strong flat white, with a shot of resilience if it's the latter." Sophie chuckled, the corners of her mouth lifting despite herself. "I think I'll take the flat white, thanks." It was little moments like these, small doses of humor and kindness, that began to anchor her. Outside of work, Sophie started walking along the beach again, alone this time, letting the wind whip her hair and the waves remind her that the world was bigger than her pain. She carried a notebook, sketching the dunes, the seagulls, even the occasional surfer catching a wave. Art had always been her refuge, and now it became a lifeline. Her friends rallied too. Jess and Tara, mates from university, dragged her out for dinners, pub quizzes, and even a weekend hike in the Blue Mountains. At first, Sophie resisted. She didn't feel up for socializing, but the laughter, the shared stories, and the gentle teasing reminded her she wasn't as alone as she thought. One evening, after a particularly long walk along the boardwalk, Sophie stopped at a lookout over the ocean. The sun dipped low, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange, and she felt a strange sense of clarity. She realized that the heartbreak, as painful as it was, had also taught her something vital. She had the strength to survive on her own. She didn't need Luke, or anyone else, to define her happiness. With renewed focus, Sophie started making changes. She enrolled in a weekend art course at a local community center, something she had always put off, thinking she didn't have the time or money. On the first day, she felt the familiar flutter of nerves, standing amidst other artists with sketchpads and paintbrushes. But as she lifted the brush, colors spilling across the canvas, she felt a rush of freedom, a reclaiming of a part of herself that had been quiet for too long. Work remained steady, but Sophie also started taking small steps toward her bigger dreams. She researched grants, looked into part-time tutoring for kids in art, and even considered a short trip up the coast to a quiet town she'd always wanted to paint. Each plan, each tiny step, was a victory over the weight of the past, yet, healing wasn't linear. Some days were harder than others. She would catch herself expecting a message from Luke, or glance at the spots they used to sit together, only to be met with an ache that made her chest tighten. On those days, she leaned into her friends, or into her art, letting her emotions flow onto paper, instead of into her heart. A turning point came unexpectedly. Sophie was at a local art exhibition, nervously showing some of her sketches, when she struck up a conversation with a man named Daniel. He wasn't like Luke, steady, thoughtful, and genuinely interested in her perspective. They talked about art, travel, and the small joys of living in the city. Sophie didn't feel the old rush of infatuation, but instead a calm curiosity, a sense that maybe new beginnings didn't have to be chaotic or painful. This encounter didn't erase the past, nor did it rush her into anything. Instead, it reinforced a truth Sophie was slowly learning: she didn't need someone else to validate her worth. She could take her time, explore new connections, and embrace her independence fully. Over the following months, Sophie's life began to shift. She spent mornings walking the beach, afternoons painting, evenings at the cafe chatting with regulars and friends. The apartment that had felt empty now seemed full of possibility. She even started planning a small solo trip along the coast, bringing her sketchpad and camera, eager to capture the beauty of places she had once only dreamed of visiting. One Saturday morning, Sophie found herself back on the dunes where she and Luke had fought. She stood at the top, letting the wind buffet her face, eyes scanning the horizon. The ocean stretched endlessly before her, waves rolling in like the steady heartbeat of the world. She felt the familiar sting of memory, but it no longer weighed her down. Instead, it reminded her that even broken dreams could teach resilience, and even heartache could give way to hope. Sophie thought about the journey ahead, full of uncertainties, challenges, and small triumphs. She knew that some days would be harder than others, that loneliness would occasionally creep back in. But she also knew that she had the tools to navigate life on her own terms: creativity, self-respect, supportive friends, and the courage to keep dreaming. By sunset, she packed her sketchpad and notebook, heading down to the water's edge. The waves lapped at her feet, cold but invigorating, and she let herself laugh aloud, a sound that felt entirely her own. It was a small moment, but in it was freedom, a reclamation of self. As she walked back along the beach, city lights twinkling in the distance, Sophie realized that heartbreak had not been the end of her story. It had been a turning point, a catalyst for growth. And while the dreams she had once shared with Luke lay scattered like shells along the shore, she could gather new ones, piece by piece, building a life that was entirely, undeniably hers. By the time she reached her apartment, the sky had darkened to a deep indigo, stars beginning to prick the night. Sophie sat by the window with a cup of tea, watching the world outside. She smiled softly to herself, a quiet affirmation of her journey. She was no longer just surviving, she was beginning to thrive. Heartbreak had shattered her illusions, yes, but it had also opened a door. And Sophie, for the first time in a long while, felt ready to walk through it. Amelia didn't sleep much after Tom's confession. She lay on her side, staring at the faint glow of the street lamp filtering through the blinds, replaying his words in her head. "I uncovered something I wasn't meant to see." It sounded like a line from a crime documentary, not something a man sleeping on her couch would say with trembling hands and fear in his eyes. Morning arrived heavy and uneasy. Tom was already awake, sitting at the kitchen table, his fingers wrapped tightly around a mug of untouched tea. He looked exhausted, but not from lack of sleep, more like someone who had been running for months without rest. "Amelia," he said quietly when she approached. "There's more I need to tell you." She sat down slowly. "I'm listening." He took a deep, steadying breath. "My real name isn't Tom. It's Thomas Blake. And I used to work for a federal investigations unit." Amelia blinked, stunned. She had expected something serious, but not that. You were, what? A detective? An agent? Something like that, he replied. I investigated white-collar crimes, political corruption, major financial fraud. Things most people don't even realize happen behind closed doors. Her throat went dry. She had taken him in, fed him, given him her bed, without knowing she was sheltering someone who once dealt with criminals for a living. So what went wrong? She asked softly. Thomas's eyes hardened with a pain she hadn't seen before. I discovered that several high-ranking officials were siphoning money through shell companies. Millions. I gathered evidence, built a case, and prepared to expose them. But someone leaked that I was investigating. Overnight, everything flipped. Evidence vanished. New evidence appeared, against me. He swallowed tightly. They framed me. Accused me of the crimes I was trying to expose. The weight of his words sank into the room like a stone dropped into deep water. And the people hunting you now, they are the ones you tried to expose? Amelia asked. Thomas nodded slowly. They are afraid I still have something on them. Something they couldn't destroy. Do you? She whispered. His silence answered for him. Amelia leaned back, trying to steady her own breathing. The situation felt surreal, absurd, even, but the fear in Thomas's eyes was real. The black car that followed her, very real. And the documents she'd glimpsed in his backpack suddenly had a terrifying context. There's something else, Thomas said, his voice steady but heavy. And you need to know why it wasn't coincidence that we met when we did. Amelia stiffened. What do you mean? Thomas closed his eyes for a moment, gathering courage. I wasn't just hiding. I was tracking someone. Someone connected to the people who framed me. Someone who owns the cafe where you work. The room froze. Amelia felt her stomach drop. My boss? Thomas nodded. He's not just a small business owner. He's a facilitator. He launders money through several businesses across Melbourne, your cafe included. I've been on his trail for months. Her hands trembled. No, that can't be right. He's strict, sure, but he's not. He's more dangerous than he appears, Thomas cut in firmly. And when you helped me that night, I realized you could be in danger without even knowing. Amelia pressed a hand over her mouth, trying to process the truth. She had walked into work every morning, made coffee, smiled at customers, completely unaware she was helping run a business tied to a major corruption ring. Why didn't you tell me earlier? She whispered. Because I needed to be sure, Thomas said. And because the less you knew, the safer you were. Before she could respond, a loud thud echoed in the hallway outside. Both of them shot to their feet. Thomas grabbed his backpack and moved toward the window, peering cautiously through the blinds. His jaw clenched. They are here. Amelia's heart pounded. What? Who? Two men in dark clothing moved down the hallway, stopping right in front of her flat door. One lifted his hand to knock, hard, deliberate, threatening. Thomas turned sharply to her. We need to go. Now? He grabbed her hand and pulled her toward the back exit. Amelia, terrified but trusting him, followed without hesitation. They slipped down the narrow stairwell, barely making a sound. The moment they reached the bottom, Thomas guided her through a side alley and into the maze-like streets behind the building. The men's voices echoed faintly in the distance. They were in the apartment. Searching. Thomas, what do they want to do to you? Amelia asked, breathless. He didn't look back. Silence me. Permanently. And anyone who helps me. A cold shiver ran through her. After several tense minutes weaving through laneways, Thomas finally slowed and guided her into a small, hidden courtyard. He checked his phone, a burner, she realized, and made a quick call. It's me, he whispered urgently. I need extraction. Amelia's with me. Yes, she knows now. He hung up and turned to her, his expression softening. the person I called is a former colleague, he said. One of the only ones I trust. He's going to help us. And help expose everything. Amelia nodded, even though her knees felt weak. What happens after that? She asked quietly. Thomas hesitated. If everything goes right, the truth comes out. The people behind this get arrested. And I get my life back. And if it doesn't? His eyes darkened. Then we run. For as long as it takes. The sound of a car pulling into the alley made Amelia flinch, but Thomas reassured her, it was the colleague. A man stepped out, waved them over, and ushered them into a safe vehicle. As they drove away, Amelia looked at Thomas. He looked tired, worn, but also hopeful. You saved me when you didn't even know me, he said softly. You didn't turn away. You didn't judge. You just helped. Amelia felt her chest ache. And now I'm part of this because of it. Thomas shook his head. You're part of this because you're brave. And because kindness can change the whole story. Amelia didn't know what awaited them, exposure, danger, freedom, or something entirely unexpected, but she knew one thing. Her life would never be ordinary again. And neither would his.